Welcome to the second regular session of June 2022. Would you please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the pledge? Pastor Casey Zesch from Bethany Lutheran.
Gracious God, thank you for this city we love and for its citizens. Thank you for your servants, our mayor, our city council members, our city manager, and all of our city staff. We thank you for the ways of service they have chosen to take up on behalf of us all. Give them grace to bring fairness, stability, and vision to our town. Bless tonight's agenda to be fruitful. Help us to remember the poor, the hungry, and those on the margins for whom you have given us special responsibility. Lead us into conversations that enrich community life. When we are undecided, lead us in your wisdom. When our opinions may disagree, unite us in a desire for the common good. Produce creative ideas and solutions to problems. Help us to live skillfully, humbly, and with imagination. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 4 is a few employee recognitions.
Okay, Mayor, Council, employee recognitions. This is my favorite part of the meeting, what will be the best part of my day today. Could I get Jaron Shahan and Pam Terry to come up to the front as I read this employee recognition? So I got this email forwarded to me from David Young, our EMS director, about these two individuals in Fire EMS. I want to read the email to you. This is from a Miss Donna White. Miss White says, "My name is Donna White. On Saturday, May 21st, my husband, Bill White, suffered a heart attack in the Doss area. The ambulance met us, was waiting for us at Hilltop on 87 North. The attendants immediately moved him from the pickup to ambulance. The only name I know is," she says, "Jared. My son and I went to Hill Country Memorial Hospital where we were told the ambulance had gone to Comfort to meet a helicopter." As you can see, a lot going on here. We were later called by Jaron. To make sure we knew which San Antonio hospital he was being taken to. He had also taken Bill's driver's license, but assured me I would get it back, which I did. I want to thank these EMS caregivers for their quick response and care. The attending Texan cardiologist said Bill only had approximately 6 hours to last. I'm so thankful they made the right decision not to stop in Fredericksburg and contact Air Flight. Their quick response more than likely saved his life. I thank you for your staff and their service, especially the two in charge that Saturday. Sincerely, Donna White. Could I get Kevin Gallender and Tyson Goff to come up, please? These gentlemen are in our sanitation department. I'm going to read to you a letter that was mailed to me by a Patrick Rominger, lives on Meadowbrook in Fredericksburg. Mr. Rominger writes, on May 24th, a tree in my neighbor's yard lost a very large limb that comprised approximately 1/3 of the tree and was partially blocking Meadowbrook Drive. I had notified her son that he could arrange to have it picked up and removed from her yard and the street. As it happened, May 25th was the pickup date for trash and limbs here in Heritage Hill Country. For residents that may not be familiar, we pick up limbs, try to on the same day we pick up trash, so it's easy to remember. The sanitation truck picking up limbs for the subdivision arrived between 8:30 and 9 o'clock on their regular rounds. The two employees, Kevin and Tyson, made quick work of a big job and had her yard and the street cleared, including sweeping up the leaves. They did this efficient and cheerfully. Both young men were very professional and pleasant. I hope that this positive evaluation finds its way to their respective personnel files and perhaps warrants a well-earned good job from you and their immediate supervisor. Thank you for you and your employees' efforts on our behalf. And I just wanted to add that these guys that pick up brush for chipping, when you look at the monthly report, it is several tons of brush that they pick up and put into the back of the chipper a month. So thank you, Kevin and Tyson.
Item number 5, excuse me, is public comment on items on the agenda. I have 3 people signed up, and ask if you prefer to wait until we get to the item, or do you want to speak now? Mr. Vince and Angela Smith and Jeanette, with regard to items on the agenda, I don't have which specific item which specific item it is? What she said.
On the mud.
Okay,
Item.
all right. And Mr. Michelle on the mud, I know, okay, want to be available. And then Angela Smith? The same issue? Okay. Is it okay if we wait till we get to that item? All right. Okay, and Mr. Moore also in your issue, okay. All right. Verbal comments, I have some for the record here. Ms. Hicks, this is a repeat from what she sent to us for our workshop today, and exact same one. And then some questions from Mo Saidi on the mud, so I'll wait till that we get there as well. He has some questions. They're my questions too, so. All right. Consent agenda. The following items may be acted upon a single motion. We have consider approval of the city council minutes for the 6th and the 8th, and the approval of a closure request from the county 4-H for August, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Crockett Street between Schubert and Travis, and Schubert between Crockett and Adams. Is that a consent item?
It's for the fair, right? It's parade. Would that be?
Is that for the parade, Jennifer?
We can let Jennifer add a little bit more detail to that.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is actually for the 4-H barbecue. I don't know if this misspelling was changed. It did say BBA, but it's BBQ. This is for their drive-through line. This is to keep traffic from basically entering in because they have such a long line during their serving time from 11 to 1.
So is this a cleanup from something that's been previously approved?
No, this is the first time it's been approved. We've just been putting all the street closures on the consent agenda because they're pretty much the same each year.
Okay. All right. Motion.
I so moved. Approve the minutes from June 6th, June 8th, and the street closure.
Just a note of clarification, do we do that with the changes that Shelley sent today?
That's a good point.
There were, on the June 6th, there was a year difference between 76 years to 78 years ago. And then on the June 8th one, that some of the titles were switched for employees, so.
A couple of typos. There were there. Okay. Did you get those, Shelley?
I did.
Okay. So with those tidying up things on the minutes and the approval for the street closure as a consent item, I need a second.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of that item, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to item number 7, which is a public hearing, receive comments for or against a request by Jeffrey Moore and Mark Eckert for the property located at 1603, 1605 East Main, Lot C, IRB of the Moore and Park Subdivision, 2 for the following Z2207, a land use change from industrial to commercial, and zoning from M2 medium manufacturing to C2 commercial.
I move we go out of regular session and public hearing.
A second.
All right, motion second to go out of regular into public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're in a public hearing. Mr. Moore, you want to go first?
Good evening, council members and mayor. Also, for just one thing off to the side, I'd like to mention also Clinton, the gentleman back here that were here a minute ago, for picking up the limbs and stuff like that. I was wanting to say the same thing. They did an excellent job on Crystal Drive. There was a house that was doing some cleanup over there, and I mean, there was this huge pile of brush. And I drove by, when I left the morning, they were started, and I came back about 30 minutes later, and they were up there, they were raking up the leaves and stuff like that. So it was brush. So they did a fantastic job, those two same guys.
Thank you.
So anyway, to our subject here, we have the property right next door at 1603 and 1605 East Main. We've had it since the early 80s and early 90s, and we'd like to request a zoning and land use change on it. We're keeping it the same. We're not going to be doing anything different with the property. And so just because it's light manufacturing, we'd like to change it to medium manufacturing. We'd like to change it to commercial, C2 commercial. And it gives us the opportunity to use it for a lot more different purposes. And so that's our request. Right?
Mary?
Hello, I'm Mary Eckert. So I'm representing the Moore Family Trust. So we're actually
Yes.
two properties here. I'm 1603 and Jeffrey is 1605, both facing East Main Street. And yes, we definitely could use this being changed to more commercial use. We currently have, we have massage people, we have showrooms there, several showrooms. We have a lighting company, we have a Morris Plumbing Company and C&D, and now we have a new tenant that's going to be a CPA in there. So that serves our community very well. So I hope y'all will consider doing this for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak on this issue? Okay.
I'd like to move that we go out of public hearing back into regular session.
Second.
Motion second to go out of public hearing into regular session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any further explanation, Clinton, on this one, or Garrett?
Mayor and council, they did an excellent job of giving you a brief overview. But again, just to summarize, it's a land use change from industrial to commercial. and then a zoning change from medium manufacturing M2 to commercial C2. Um, Based on the surrounding properties, it's a mix of public safety and industrial in this area. So combined with the fact that the property's front 290, it seems to make sense that we would change this to a C2 zoning. I did want to mention, public hearing was held at the P&Z meeting on June 8th. We received no public input at that time, and P&Z unanimously approved the application. So given that, staff is recommending approval.
Since then, there's been no
No, sir.
neighbor response.
No additional
Okay.
public input.
Councilman,
I'll move to approve as presented.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second to approve this request.
Mayor, we've got two ordinances. I need the council to take action on each independent ordinance.
Okay. So let's do a motion on the first one, the land use change.
I'll move to approve ordinance 2022-22 land use change from industrial to commercial.
Second.
All right, thank you. Motion second to change that land use industrial to commercial. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll move to approve ordinance 2022-23 zoning change from M2 medium manufacturing to C2 commercial.
Second.
Motion second to approve the zoning change, medium manufacturing to commercial. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Meeting papers. One of these days we can go digital, right? Okay. All right, item number 8 is ordinance and resolutions. First is 8A, consider the approval. Oh, we did that. At B, consider the approval of the request of sorry, folks, it's been a long week already, and it's only Monday. Consider the approval of Resolution 2022-11R, petition for consent of the creation of a municipal utility district. This is pages 29 through 70 in your packet. I know you've all read it, reviewed it.
This is the one that I think Mo had questions about in this
You
letter.
did. Thank you. Let's get these on the record because these are pertinent. Does the city collect the ad valorem tax from the MUD residents in the same manner as normal city residents, or does MUD collect this tax and dispose of it appropriately transparent to the city? Who will answer that? Does the city collect these property taxes at the city rate on this proposal?
I can try to answer that question. So the residents will, in that location, will still be taxed as all other city property. And then in addition to that, there will be, the MUD will have their own taxing layer on top of that, which they will collect as a separate taxing entity. And they will use those funds for the purpose within that MUD. So there shouldn't be, they're not going to collect on behalf of the city or anything like that. And then send, it's just another layer, just like you've got school district, city, county. This will be another taxing entity on your tax bill, essentially.
Will that tax go to the MUD organization, or will it go to CCAD or GCAD?
Well, I think it will be up to that entity to decide if they want to utilize the appraisal district to collect on their behalf. We have a contract with the appraisal district to collect on behalf of the city. So they could essentially work out the same agreement, or I guess do it independently if they wanted to do that.
Okay.
But the money that a MUD collects goes mostly to retiring the debt of the MUD, right?
Right. It's only for the
Yeah.
purpose of the MUD
Yeah.
operation and debt service for the MUD.
They collect the city rate of property tax, and then they add on top of the MUD finance for the infrastructure finance.
I guess in the simplest terms, the property owners in the mud will pay an additional tax to the mud above and beyond what all the other property owners in the city pay, just to the city.
Okay.
And they will pay that either to the mud directly or maybe through the appraisal district if they collect on behalf of the mud as part of their annual tax bill they would receive.
Now, would the same rate of water sewer be applied to these residents, or are there special rates?
My understanding, it'll be the same rates.
This would all be in the agreement, right? This is all specified in the agreement that we work out with.
The city has an annexation agreement with the developer that was done prior to the mud being proposed. But they will be, I mean, this property is in the city limits, so they will be treated like any other in-city utility and utility users. So they'll pay the in-city rate.
Okay. Are the permits for putting in the infrastructure paid by the developer, or were there special waivers in the original agreement, or in what's been proposed up to now?
I don't recall there being any concessions by the city
Okay.
related to permits for infrastructure.
Okay. Jeanette, would you like to speak on this? Oh, she's going to let you speak for her, Angela? Okay, great. Speak, then. Please go ahead.
Speaking first, then Jim.
Who's speaking first?
Angela.
Hi, my name is Angela Smith. I live in Gillespie County, and I am here to talk about what I believe the mud would do for the city and the negativity of it. What is a mud? A never-ending double taxation, a way for developers to use homeowners' money for profit, and a way to avoid density requirements that cities enforce to control growth. MUDs in Texas are approved by the TCEQ, and they are designed to get utilities to areas that do not have access to city utilities. In theory, this allows the developer to pay for the water lines, sewers, streets, and be repaid by the homeowners who will ultimately benefit from those things. It sounds like a great idea, but as is often the case, this idea has been distorted to allow developers to protect their own financial interests, guarding themselves from risk, and instead using a resolution from a local governing body, the city in this case, to get a bond approved, backed by the taxes the homeowners will pay. The developer needs a resolution from the city government indicating that they have approved the development to secure the bond backed by future taxes. If the mud is inside the city limits, as it would be, the homeowners pay what amounts to a double tax. Their normal municipal tax and the mud money, which goes to the developer. To make matters worse, mud taxes have no expiration date. I repeat, they have no expiration date. They can and generally do continue long after the developer's bond debt for the utility services is paid for in full. So even if a homeowner does not fall into the unfortunate category of those who pay double taxes, they are unnecessarily paying thousands of additional dollars of profit right into the developer's pocket. Case in point is Rockwall County, which is a highly sought after location for development. City utilities are easily accessible for developers, so why are the MUDs allowed? The short answer is because developers want them, and under current county leadership there, the developers are in control. New developments can and should be tied into existing city utility services. It is cost effective. It also has the benefit of bringing those developments under the control of each city's individual comprehensive plan. This keeps control of the pace and scale of growth exactly where it should be, with the people who live there. I stand today against the mud.
Yeah, I asked Angela to go first because I wanted that information to be put out. I am against the mud, or at least asking the council to maybe table this and take a better look at it to make sure that you know what what you're getting into. To me, it doesn't look like probably something that would, that we want to get entangled to. And like when I was reading the agenda, the packet, and it's saying basically, it looks like people are going to be paying two taxes, double tax also. So anyway, I'm against the mud, would ask you to vote against it, or at least table it and get more information on it. Thank you.
Vince? Help us with this.
Mayor, council members, I don't have a particular agenda to speak on, but am readily available to answer any questions or clarify as best I can, subject to the MUD proposal that you've got in front of you.
Is it all right if we answer some questions?
Let me ask you, we've got some other muds in the city, right? I thought there was one down over at the Earth
I don't
Farm.
believe there are.
Okay, so that wasn't at the,
So this would be the first one, as far as we know, as far as you know.
As far as I know, yes.
Sure.
So how are we certain, what kind of financial protection do we have if the developer doesn't sell all the houses in the mud?
The city has no liability. You're not backstopping any of the debt that is being incurred by the MUD. So that would be a separate matter. That if that were to be the case, the state would then be the entity that would step in.
Even though it's in the city, even though the property is inside the city?
That's correct. That's correct. Because you're not, the city has no liability as far as backstopping any bond or any financing that the MUD would need for the development.
My understanding, this is a way to have some more affordable housing or more attainable housing. Can you address that?
I think all of y'all have gotten my housing study by now. You may not have a chance to go on that. I talked a bit about a MUD in that. Generally, I'm in favor of MUDs. Historically, they have shown to reduce the overall development cost and, in essence, a reduction in the actual cost of the house to a homeowner. Unfortunately, it's a little bit difficult because we're in a whole new world as far as housing over this last year and a half. So historically, it has. Is there any guarantees that the developer is going to convey the cost savings onto a homeowner? The answer is no. In other words, there's nothing stipulated in legally that says, okay, you're saving X amount based on this tax exempt financing on a bond that is passed on. But typically, in a very competitive market, the reason why they do it is because it is a competitive market and they're needing to get any opportunity they can to reduce their costs and to reduce the purchase price of the home to make it competitive. So it's, even though it's not built in, and indirectly it is built in, and that's typically what you see historically by the developers, that they will pass that savings on. Now, you can also think about it more as a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, because if they do pass it on and reduce the cost of the home, there are additional property taxes over and above what they would normally pay. So if you're going to get, like, say, a mortgage and you're trying to qualify, there's going to be additional taxes that you would pay, which means that you would need to have additional income in order to qualify for that loan. So it can be, but not, again, not necessarily. I will say that that communities have used this successfully, and that in a highly competitive market where you are trying to attract development, you're in competition with these other communities. And that's kind of the new cost of doing business, is that you're going to need to get a little bit maybe more involved than you may not have in the past in order to attract developers to come into your community and build, because if you don't do it, they're looking at a variety of other opportunities. They can spend their money. Everybody needs housing. So the capacity of a community to assist and do what it can for a developer in order to make sure that that their costs are reduced as much as possible, I think going forward is going to be the new normal. So no guarantees that the reduction in the expenses from the developer is going to pass through, but historically it has.
You use the term cost of doing business. How is it a cost of doing business if it doesn't cost us anything? Did I miss something? Sorry.
The cost of doing business is, in essence, not a physical cost, but some things that you may not have agreed to in the past, subject to considerations such as the approval of a MUD, as we're discussing today. Typically, it's like historically you would say, no, just tie in and there's no need for it. It's an additional layer of governance, inside the city. But those considerations historically may need to be rethought going forward. So it's not a physical cost in what I was talking about. There may be a community or a political cost of doing things that you may not historically have elected to do simply because of the trying to maintain that separation between the public and the private sector.
Vince, typically is the MUD approved before construction?
Not necessarily. I know they've already broken ground out there. I would probably venture to say that the development is going to move forward regardless. But the housing market has rolled over in the last month, and so there are a lot there. The housing starts permitting are starting to take a dive, and that really was a result of the rapid increase in mortgage interest payments from 3.2 in January all the way to 6.2. That basically has taken about $80,000 of house that was affordable that now, because of the interest rates, is not. So all of these developers are going to be looking at viable developments in their pipelines, and they're going to start picking and choosing which ones they do, regardless of whether they have started or not. There's no guarantee that they are going to continue on. I would expect that they would. They've already started investing. Lennar's bought the property. They've already started, starting the infrastructure there. So, but there's no guarantee that they would continue on based on my understanding of the current status.
I have not seen anything in the presentation that shows what kind of savings the homeowner would be saving on the purchase price using a MUD.
That would not, they would never, a developer would never codify that in a MUD application, because right now they're not sure themselves, quite frankly, until they know the true, the cost of the full development once it goes in. So, in other words, I guess what you're asking is this going to save $40,000 per lot? I can't tell you that. I don't have the financials of the builder to tell you that. And typically, like I said, it's my understanding that they would never hold themselves to that by basically saying we're going to automatically reduce the cost of this lot. Real estate's real estate. This is a for-profit business. They're going to maximize their profit. So they're going to sell these properties at market rate, whatever that market is at the time that house hits the market. But again, in a normal housing market where supply and demand has been balanced, They have always had that ability, so it gives the developer that capacity to come into a community and build a little cheaper so that they can put the house up for a less price to get a little bit under the market. Because this is a tract builder. This is a spec home builder. They work on volume. So they're not, they might be looking at the market, what the market price of this, but they're really looking at a cost plus, what are my costs plus what my return needs to be. And that's really where they're set their price. So typically it is saved, but defining it on a numbers basis that doesn't happen.
But their money that they're using to develop is somewhat cheaper because they're funding it with these tax-free bonds that investors are willing to put their money in because they can pay lower interest because the interest is tax-free.
That's
Am I correct?
Yes. Yes. And it's amortized over a longer period of time.
Yeah, they're normally 30-year.
That's
Bonds
correct.
are usually 30 years.
Right. Now, it's my understanding, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, is this development is in phases. And typically what they do is, before they move on to the next phase, is that they collect the needed money and then retire the debt on that phase before they issue additional debt for the next phases. So again, legally, I can't speak of that, but that's generally how the process works. So they would not get into a bind, in other words, where they would overextend themselves and overbuild and then not have the homes sell in order to cover a large cost. They're going to do it in steps.
Counsel, over my 41-year career, I've bought many of these mud bonds for my clients with very good results, as long as there's demand for the properties in the district, which I think we would have here.
Is Mr. Sparrow here?
Yes.
Okay. Let's hear from him. Thank you, Vince.
Sure.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Mark Sparrow with HK Real Estate Development, kind of the master developer of Friendship Oak Subdivision. Just here to answer any questions you got. Happy to start with a little background on the community. Lennar acquired a phase of the property, so roughly about 30 acres earlier this year, and then moved forward with the development of that on their own. And with that development, there were certain offsite improvements associated with the Friendship Oak subdivision, such as street improvements to Friendship Lane will get eventually made. There'll be some turn lanes installed on US 87. In addition, there's an extension of Creek Street through the property from Friendship Lane all the way to US 87. That road is what we call in the development side a no-load road, meaning that we can't put houses on facing that street, so you don't have driveways touching. So, these are expenses coupled with an off-site sewer extension that we're making. These are expenses that we would have to roll into the cost of the lot if we weren't pursuing a municipal utility district to get reimbursed. Which would add to the overall lot cost. In addition, in accordance with the annexation agreement, there's an obligation by the developer or Lennar to put in an amenity center as well. So there's an additional cost associated with that. The amenity does not get reimbursed by the MUD, but it's still an additional cost, an incremental cost to a typical lot that doesn't have, parks, amenities, that.
Mark, have you developed MUDs before?
Yes.
What is the usual kind of dissolution of a MUD? Is it 30 years? Does it?
Typically it's 25.
25. Right.
Is Is this mud over just the section that Lennar purchased? Or is
Yeah,
it for the whole?
It is over, HK acquired 111 acres. The district boundary will be 90 acres, which is the property that Lennar has.
Okay.
So what I understood Mr. Michelle say is that there's not a standard agreement for, it's not a standard agreement for the amount of savings that a MUD would provide each homeowner.
No, I'd say right now it's kind of fluid because a lot depends on one, what MUD tax rate we adopt.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, as you know, expenses of the development could
Yeah.
change over the life of the project. So those are kind of hard to project.
Yeah, I can understand that it's got to be complex, but the issue of addressing the attainable affordability issue, housing, which is my target, I don't know, I would need some sort of benchmark, I guess, to know that this would address that problem to some sufficient degree. There's no way to do that?
I got Ryan Harper with Allen Boone Humphreys and Robinson with me. So he has a lot more kind of background on
Yeah.
the creation of.
I admit that it's a lot of my not understanding, you know, the details.
So he might have a better benchmark or
Yeah.
kind of what
Yeah.
he's kind of normally sees.
Yeah. But I would think if the point of a MUD is that the developer is fronting the cost for the infrastructure and then gets that paid back by the people who benefit from the home that they bought, right? That's basic concept. That's that for dummies. Okay. Then I'd have to have some quantification of what that is of each homeowner, because our big deal is trying to address the unit costs of housing for labor, for workforce. And I have to have the dots connected. Is there any way I can pursue that?
Mayor, I'll try to address that. So that will vary depending on the project and the infrastructure costs. But generally speaking, over the history of MUDs, that number could be 50 to 100 to 150,000. It's a significant amount. Obviously, the higher the infrastructure cost, the lower amount of lots, there's more savings there. It just depends on how it's spread out over the life of the project. But there's not a exact quantifiable amount that'll differ depending on the project.
Well, talk to me about what you know about this specific one then. How big is it? How long? And how many units? And
This project is 420 single-family homes that will be included in the MUD district boundary.
how many phases?
There'll be 3. Well, I think they got it now into 4 phases. The first phase is under development. It is 104 single-family lots. The second unit will be approximately 130. The plans for those 130 lots have already been approved by the city, so they'll be submitting a plat, you know, for those when they're ready to move forward with the next unit. And that would leave a balance of, right now, there's somewhere around 190 lots left.
So by forming a MUD, the developer can borrow money at a lower rate because the interest is going to be tax-free to the investors. Is there any other savings that the developer gets for the MUD other than the cost of the money? I'm just I'm going on with the mayor's question, like how does that equate to affordable housing?
Right. So, well, for one, from the affordable housing perspective, you've got, if the developer does not have a MUD, then all the costs of the infrastructure have to be rolled into the lot price and then ultimately the home price that the home buyers buy. So rather than putting, say, $100,000 of infrastructure into the lot and making a $250,000 house $350,000, it stays at $250,000. And so that's the savings to the homeowners. But from the developer perspective, there will still be loans. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There will still be loans, but the great thing about the way the MUD financing works is that as the development progresses and as the taxable value increases, because there's financial feasibility rules in place with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ, that regulates when a MUD can issue bonds. And so when the MUD issues those bonds, though, that capital can be redeployed quickly into the project, as opposed to oftentimes with private financing, the bank will not loan on the next phase of development until all the loans are repaid. So that allows the project to continue to move forward, and that obviously then brings down the borrowing costs and the cost of the project on the developer as well. But one thing I'd like to clarify too on the dissolution of the district. So the typical MUD bonds are 25-year maturities, but in your consent resolution, there is a provision that the city could dissolve the district sooner than that. Once the infrastructure is constructed, installed, and financed, the city would have the ability to dissolve the district if it so chooses.
Why would the city want to do that?
I don't know. No,
I'm trying to think of an example.
right. So sometimes with a MUD, a lot of MUDs are created in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. There are a lot of MUDs created in city as well. But with an in-city MUD, the city still receives all the benefits of a development being in the city. So there's really not the same incentive for the city to dissolve the MUD and annex the property into the city's corporate limits. So here in this case, there wouldn't be a reason to, because the other part of the MUD, the idea is that growth pays for itself. Because if I'm a resident living over here in the city, this is not my new neighborhood. Why do I want to pay for the infrastructure in this new neighborhood? And so the idea being that the folks that move into that neighborhood pay for the infrastructure related to that development.
So this is not, sorry, real quick, this is not necessarily an attainable housing project short-term because this is increasing our supply by 420 homes, right? If this stays for just residents, I'd be curious to know if there's any kind of STR prohibition, because I think this was R1 zoned and now it's R2 and R3. So if our goal is to increase the supply for residents, I'd be interested in hearing more about an STR prohibition.
Okay, with respect to zoning, the property that's in the district is R1A.
It is, okay.
Yeah, all R1A. And my understanding from the new ordinance that was put into place that there is no short-term rental of R1 or R1.
Great, okay, I'm sorry. In the slideshow, it was saying R2 and R3. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Also, on the additional tax to pay for the MUD, how does that compare with the property tax, or what kind of tax is a homeowner looking at over and above the property tax?
So the TCQ also has guidelines on what property tax limits are for certain counties. There's 3 categories. Some districts are in counties that allow up to $1.50 tax rate, combined tax rate. Some are in $1.20 and some are in $1. Gillespie County would be in $1. But because it's in the city, it's also $1 less the city property tax, and that would be the maximum tax that the district could levy. And so that tax would go towards debt service on paying the principal and interest on the bonds that are used to finance the infrastructure, and then also the maintenance and operation. So another part of the non-annexation agreement, development agreement that was in place previously with the landowner is a requirement that the detention is maintained separately. And so the MUD would own and maintain the detention pond, so if the city is not paying the maintenance on detention. And then if I could also clarify a couple of the comments with respect to the never-ending tax rate. So the idea behind the MUD is that the district will levy the tax rate that's necessary to pay for the debt service on the bonds and then the operation and maintenance. Once the bonds are issued and the infrastructure begins to be paid off, then the debt service that the MUD levies initially will then start to decline, and then you'll be left with maintenance and operation. So it'll continue to go down over time. It's not a steady tax rate. And then also from the district perspective with the city, it's also a market competitive nature as well, right? So the lower the tax rate, then the more competitive the home sales are as well. So that's something that's taken into account by the developer.
Ms. Kirchner, did I hear you say that you're appealed to by the number of units this will add to the stock?
Yes. What do you mean? My appeal to my liking a MUD?
Yeah.
I mean, I think from what I have seen of MUDs, they're usually in the ETJ and this is interesting because it's in our city limits, but as I look at, the builder wanting to prioritize their projects, if this is a funding mechanism that would help get them going faster. And, the mud tax, it's a very much user pays. It's the people who are benefiting from those roads and all those, upgrades are living there. And, 420 home sites, that could get people maybe who are in apartments right now that could move over into a single family home. And then people who need to be in an apartment could move in. So kind of that shift over a couple years.
We're talking a long time before 400 units are up, right?
Unless, how fast are y'all?
I understand the concept, but I think I do. But without any quantification, I don't know how to address it. I mean, I understand the concept of, yes, this helps the home price go down a little, or be down a little bit because they're paying for the infrastructure over time rather than the developer paying for it and then setting the house price next to it. That's the small concept I understand. But without any sort of, so it's going to reduce it this much in this amount of time, and the city is not at risk in any area this way. So maybe it's just the questions I have failed to ask at this point, but those are the things that I would need to know before. Am I missing something? Yeah, I want to understand.
What we're looking at here, and Councilmember Kirschner had kind of brought it up, is the fact that these houses get built and you substantially increase the supply of houses is in and of itself going to reduce the purchase price of the houses simply because of a balance of supply and demand. We are woefully undersupplied here. So I understand that you're trying to get a very specific
No, I'm just trying to get some range.
Number. There's
Okay.
way too many other market forces associated with that. What I can tell you is that typically, historically, there's been approximately 50 to 60 new family homes that have been constructed on an annual basis here, which has been relatively stable. The last couple of years, it's gone up to 80. But again, there's not enough supply in this market. So anything that you can do to assist a developer, and specifically what would be called a tract developer, where they're actually going to go build the homes and then sell them, as opposed to have somebody in their contract and then go build the house, like typically is what's being done here. So the key to me is, if you want to get the price of the house down, increase the supply and look at it in that respect, as opposed to a individual house subject to this only one component. There are a number of components that are going to wash out over the next 18 months as these houses get built. One of the things, for an example, is that the price of lumber has absolutely collapsed over the last couple of months. I mean, literally collapsed by 70%. It was $1,500 per 1,000 board feet back at the height. Now it's $400, back to pre-pandemic levels. So there are a lot of forces as the supply chains get unclogged. The costs for the developers are going to continue to go down, and they're going to need to go down because interest rates have gone up. So this is just one component among a number of components that need. And to me, having a developer that's willing to come in here and commit to a high volume of houses built is more than anything else to really affect the actual cost of the house going forward.
Mark, when Lanier was made a presentation, they had a ballpark of what their target sell price was. Do you remember what that was?
No, not off the top of my head, I do not.
Now, are these units like 1,000 square feet, or what's the plan there?
I would think they would probably start somewhere around 1,200 square feet.
1,200.
And probably go, 22 to 25 square feet.
Understand what they're trying to do, and I can see it, but you can't come up with a number. Is that they're trying to put in some affordable houses, and that's an instrument to use, the mud.
Well, let me do this. I know that I believe in our petition that we submitted to the city, there was a number in there for total infrastructure improvements. If I recall correctly, I don't have the petition in front of me. I want to say it was somewhere around 18 or $19 million, which would include sewer, water, drainage, detention, and roads. If you divide that by the 420 lots, if my calculator is correct, we're probably looking at $42,000 to $43,000 of potential reimbursement to the over the life of the project. So, Mayor, to give you kind of a number, that would be kind of a number. But again, that all is dependent on the tax rate that gets adopted. You know, as Ryan mentioned, we could put a tax rate up there at 80 cents. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be something probably less than that.
But the savings, just for conversation purposes, if the savings is $42,000, the original thought was to sell a house at $250,000. We'll just throw that number out. But with the increase in cost of material, transportation, everything else, the cost of the house is now $350,000. The 42 is still, but the house is not as attainable as it was a year ago when we were talking.
That would be correct, yeah. Especially, you know, now all of a sudden mortgage rates ticking up and obviously. You know,
right.
But the same numbers.
Without the mud, it would definitely be.
It would be 400.
Right.
Yeah, the same numbers would be in play on anything else that they would buy in the area.
Sure.
I see Kent's with us, and he's the one we have the memo from. Kent, can you weigh in on this and how this, from the affordable housing standpoint?
Tim Lindbergh?
No.
Did we lose
Kent
him?
Myers.
Oh, Kent. Oh. Kent?
Did you hear my question? I said, since the memo we have.
This is a project that has been under discussion since last year, and I recognize we have a new council that hasn't been privy to the previous discussion. But let me just back up and give you a little background information. Last November, the previous council had a work session and talked about some different affordable housing strategies. And MUD was one of the strategies that was discussed. And in fact, it's covered as an affordable housing strategy in Vince's affordable housing report that hopefully all of you have read. But the council at that time directed staff that they had general consensus that they favored the MUD financing, and they directed staff for us to continue to work with the developer to try to structure a MUD proposal and bring it back to the city council. So what has happened in the last 6 months is basically we've been involved. The official petition to create the MUD was presented about 4 months ago. And since that time, we've been through a legal review process that has involved Daniel, our bond counsel, the attorney that's, I believe, at your meeting tonight. And also we have involved Dan Wegmiller, our financial advisor. So changes were made to the resolution that's before you this evening. Primarily, language is added to Exhibit B in the resolution that was recommended by our bond counsel. So, again, I wanted to kind of give you that background information. But to get to Gerald's point, and Gerald, I understand your frustration with the inability to quantify this, but at the same time, I don't think we want to mislead the city council or any of the citizens that this can be quantified and result in a specific savings on the housing cost. And one of the reasons for that is because the pricing of homes, for the most part, is market driven. It's driven by the cost of construction, the cost of labor, the cost of interest rates, and all that is unknown because a lot of these houses won't be built for a couple of years. So Gerald, it'd be nice to say that it's going to save $50,000 on the cost of a home, but I think that would be really misleading people. But there will be some cost savings due to the fact that there's interest. The financing for the infrastructure will be through tax-exempt bonds versus conventional financing. And again, until that financing is locked in, we don't know if it's going to be 2 basis points or 5 basis points, but there will be some savings that hopefully the developer will pass along to the home buyer. And also keep in mind that the property taxes that the homeowners will pay, those are tax deductible on your federal income tax. So there's several ways that the homeowner will benefit from this financing. But again, I don't want to offer any sort of quantification of that, Joe. I don't think anybody, Vince or Mark or anybody else can quantify it, but it has been proven to create more affordability in housing, and that's why it's one of the strategies that Vince has identified in his report.
Okay, well, let me address that. I'm not asking for a dollar amount. When I say quantification, maybe that's not the right word. I'm not saying, can you guarantee that these houses will be $50,000 less than what they would be otherwise without a mud? What I'm asking is, what are the bases for these to say that these are savings? Beyond Vince's point that it increases the supply, which is certainly valuable. I'm asking, what do mud people say? This is the reason that this is such a great thing for affordable housing, or this is a partial solution for attainable housing. On what basis? What are the criteria? What are the questions they ask themselves? It doesn't have to be a dollar amount. I just want to know what's the concept that this does that. Beyond that, well, if everything goes well, if the market's good to us, and we can build at this rate, and infrastructure costs this, and we have these buyers, and we've got tax-free bonds, et cetera. I get all that. I'm just wondering, I guess I just feel the need for some other piece. Maybe I'm not understanding it well.
I can address that if you'd like. So the whole idea behind it is that the infrastructure is paid over time rather than paid for upfront in the lot cost in the home price. So if those costs can be financed over a 25-year amortization, then you don't have to pay all those upfront
I get
costs.
all that.
And that's really the quantification is the infrastructure cost there.
Yeah, I get that. So, okay, so maybe I'm trying to apply a standard that just doesn't fit this particular solution.
Well, I think one other benefit, Gerald, that maybe hasn't been mentioned, when you're a first-time home buyer, particularly, you have to pre-qualify. So I would think it'd be a lot easier to pre-qualify for a house at $350,000 versus $300,000. So that will bring some new first-time home buyers into the market that weren't previously able to purchase homes in Fredericksburg.
Absolutely.
Does that help?
Absolutely.
And normally MUDs are usually in the ETJ where there's no hookups right there, right? So more of the infrastructure costs are needed. So the city is not having to put the lines out to this development in the ETJ, right? Isn't that how it normally works? Not so much in the city.
So I wouldn't say normally, but there are certainly more ETJ MUDs than in-city MUDs, but there are a significant amount of in-city MUDs as well. And from the city's perspective, an in-city MUD is great because the city still receives the property tax value with it being in the city, and the city is not paying for the infrastructure to be extended to that new development. So here, the whole idea would be that all the facilities the plans and specs for those facilities are approved by the city. There's no variances. We're following city standards. Once the facilities are constructed, they're all up to city's code, and then they're conveyed to the city at no cost to the city. And then so this project, the water and sewers extended, the roads extended, and then subsequently, maybe it's that next track that needs then utilities. And so the idea is that the infrastructure just keeps getting extended at no additional cost to the city.
Is that infrastructure conveyed to the city at completion or at the end of the node?
At completion. So once the facilities are constructed, the city will do the inspections, assuming everything passes then it'll be conveyed to the city. The city will then own and operate all those facilities. All the residents in the MUD will then be utility customers of the city, will pay the city water and sewer rates. So the MUD won't own those facilities. It'll be as if they are in a city development without the MUD. The only thing that the MUD will own and maintain is the detention pond, which the city doesn't want to.
Okay. That's my next question. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And so there's no variances that are being requested. Everything is up to city code and standards. It's not some workaround. It's really merely a financing tool for the infrastructure.
Do we have any comments from Garrett or Chris on this?
The only thing I would clarify is we have a 2-year maintenance bond. So after the city does the inspection,
we get a 2-year maintenance bond, and after that 2-year maintenance bond, if there's no items that need to be corrected, then we accept those utilities and roadways. I don't have any further comments other than that.
I have a process question because if this is our first MUD for this county, right? Are they going to ever go through planning and zoning since this is kind of planning these little entities? Or are we just going to start at the city level, council level?
No, each phase will go through the standard city development process. So phases 1 and 2 have already gone through that. The preliminary plat as a whole has already been approved.
Totally. I mean, the creation of the MUD, is that something that planning and zoning should be working on to factor in areas we want MUDs to be versus not? Or does that just start with the council?
This is probably just a development strategy. So if the developer proposes a MUD, it would have been, I feel it would have been better to have this discussion on the front end. But, it is an avenue they can take to fund the development.
The reason this is in front of the council is because the statute requires council consent for them to even submit their petition. So, so there's nothing in the statute that says it needs to go to planning and zoning. I mean, I guess you could ask, for them to make a recommendation or something if you wanted them to do that. But, procedurally, I don't know if that really works since it's initiated by the property owner, not by the city.
So once we get our consent, it's a done deal, and there's not any negotiation of any of the parts of it. It's resolved that that we have a MUD, right?
No, it's a procedural step to have to obtain your consent before they move to the next step. And I think that maybe Ryan can explain that.
Parts of it come back to us for more.
So the way the process works is that the water code and the local government code requires that a city consent to creation of a district that's in their ETJ or in the city limits. So once you receive city consent, then you can go to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and you submit a whole creation application report based on engineering and financial feasibility, and the state approves the MUD. The reason it doesn't go to planning and zoning is because the MUD versus the development are really two different things. You have the MUD, and that's for the infrastructure, the utilities, the water, sewer, drainage, roads. And then you've got the development standards, and that's what would go through, as you were saying, the plat would then go to planning and zoning.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if I could clarify also another comment earlier regarding the issuance of bonds and how the process works. So really, the city has no financial obligations or liability with respect to the MUD. And the way the process works is that the MUD cannot issue bonds until there's sufficient taxable value to support the issuance of debt to pay for those bonds. And so it's not, in some states, there's raw land deals where it's based on speculative projections. It's going to be $100 million worth of development, so I want to issue X amount of bonds. In Texas, that's not how it works. The TCEQ has very strict financial feasibility requirements, and each time you submit a bond application to the TCEQ, you have to prove up that you can meet those requirements based on the assessed value that the appraisal district gives to the property. And I think there's also a question earlier about collection of taxes. So the appraisal district will set the property values as they would for anywhere else in the city, but then the MUD actually levies the property tax.
Would it be appropriate for me to have Ms. Smith clarify what she said?
It's at your discretion.
Okay. Would you mind stepping aside for a second, gentlemen? Thank you. Angela, would you come up? I missed some of what you said, and I didn't want to. What is your main point?
Let me go to my notes here. Give me
Okay.
just a moment. I'm going to go back to the very beginning when I stated the 3 points here. A never-ending double taxation. There is no stated, if you will, there's no nothing that makes the mud. Let me get here. There's no sunset on it, basically.
I'm sorry, what?
There's no sunset, if you will. Also, this is a way for homeowners to use, for developers to use that homeowner's money for profit because of what I just said. It can continue on. You don't have any control over that. You don't have any control over what they're going to do. As you've kind of seen already, we don't even know if this is going to provide the target, something that's affordable. We don't know that. And then, in my opinion, what's most concerning for our standard of living here is that it's a way to avoid the density requirements that cities enforce to control growth. Am I incorrect here? I'd be happy to take a comment on that.
Yeah, but we also are endeavored with the affordable housing. And if this is the way to do it. Now, you're right. The question is how do we know they're going to do the right thing?
Right. Let me just go back and read through and I'll take my time, okay? I was trying to, with the timer going, I'm a little speed reader. MUDs in Texas are approved by the DCEQ, which we understood. They're designed to get utilities to areas that do not have access to city utilities. In theory, this allows the developer to pay for the water lines, the sewers, the streets, and be repaid by the homeowners who will ultimately benefit from those things, which does sound good in theory. But as is often the case, and this is seen in other municipalities, so we could do further research into the effect of this into other municipalities before making a decision tonight, and I think that might be wise since this is our first one. As often is the case, this idea has been distorted to allow developers to protect their own financial interests. And I don't discount that. I understand the need to do that, guarding themselves from risk and instead using a resolution from a local governing body, in this case the city, to get a bond approved, backed by the taxes the homeowners will pay. The developer needs the resolution from the city indicating that they have approved the development to secure the bond backed by future taxes. If the MUD is inside city limits, the homeowners pay what amounts to a double tax, their normal municipal tax, and the MUD money, which goes to the developer. To make matters worse, MUD taxes have no expiration date. I think this is highly concerning. And I am happy to hear discussion on that if there is something that is not correct concerning that. But I don't think anyone has said tonight that they have an expiration date. They can and generally do, historically do, continue long after the developer's bond debt for the utility services paid in full. So even if a homeowner does not fall into the category of those who pay double taxes, they are paying thousands of additional dollars of profit right into the developer's pocket.
Okay.
This is historical, and there are actual cases of this.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you, Council, for letting me indulge to get clarity on the speaker.
I think they have answers to their
Yeah, maybe we address those comments, please.
Yes.
piece.
All right, so with respect to the first item of never-ending taxation, nothing that makes the mud sunset. So as I mentioned in the consent resolution, there's actually a provision in there in Exhibit B that states that the city could dissolve the district after the infrastructure is constructed and financed. So that is your sunset if the city so chooses. So the district could exist longer to maintain, for example, a detention pond. And the idea being oftentimes that's really a city discretion, city policy, whether or not they want to dissolve the district, because if the district is dissolved, then the city would take on maintenance of, for example, detention pond. And it may be over time that as the debt is issued and paid off, the only thing left is to maintain the detention. So in that case, the tax rate is going to go like this and pay for just maintenance of the detention pond. But again, that's a city discretion, city policy. If the city decides 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now that you want to dissolve the district, then there's nothing that would prevent the city from doing so.
That's in the city's hands.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Go on.
Um,
Can I add one thing? But if there's outstanding debt, does the city have to assume that debt?
So the city would assume the debt based on the taxable value that's in the district. So if the city tax rate is sufficient to pay the debt based on the taxable value that's created in the district, then it would be a net revenue assumption by the city. So oftentimes, and this is just from a historical perspective, some cities choose to dissolve districts early. Some decide, well, we're not going to dissolve the district until all the debt is paid off. But it just depends on all the factors from, finances, what's the city tax rate times the taxable value, what revenue does that produce? Is that sufficient to pay the debt service on the bonds?
Is the mud owned by the developer?
No, the MUD, and that was the next point. So the MUD is a local government. The MUD is a special district, just like a school district or a county, city, any other local government. It's a political subdivision of the state of Texas. And so it's subject to all the Open Meetings Act, Texas Public Information Act requirements. In fact, a MUD is probably the most regulated special purpose district in the state.
So all the payments that the homeowners make go to the mud and not the developer?
Correct. So the payments from the homeowners will go to the MUD. The MUD will levy a debt service tax and then also an operations and maintenance tax. And so when the MUD collects that, the debt service will then go to pay off the bonds, and then the maintenance and operations will go to pay to maintain the district facilities.
Okay.
And then once the developer has been reimbursed, the developer doesn't see any of that money. That just goes to the MUD. And so again, as the debt's paid off, then there's really the only thing that's left is maintenance at that point.
So the MUD would have a governing body, like a district board.
Yes, there's resident directors will be elected by the residents in the district.
But doesn't the developer maintain a vote, like for each one of the lots, and then it's just by the people
No, it's not like an
living in
HOA.
the MUD?
It's not like an HOA. It's the same. So it's subject to the Texas Election Code, just like city council, just like county commissioners.
So it's by the residents.
Right. There will
Thank
be an election. They're subject to 4-year terms, and then there will be an election to elect new directors, or the same directors may remain in place.
Great clarification. Great clarification. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's see, what else was there?
She's addressed density, and isn't
The density, yes.
density part of what makes it more affordable?
So the density has nothing to do with the MUD. Sometimes in connection with a MUD, there might be a development agreement where there are negotiations on reducing or increasing density and reducing lot sizes. Again, here, there's no variance requests. We're following city standards. So there's nothing to do with density. And again, that's where I was saying earlier, there's really two different issues. You've got the development, and then you've got the MUD, which is just related to the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Is there a standard MUD agreement that you make with cities, or do they each have specific features?
So to your point earlier about the ETJ MUDs, the water code sets out specific provisions that a city can include in a consent resolution. When it's an in-city mud, there can be more consent conditions, which, as you'll see in the proposed consent resolution, there are more than what's set forth in the water code. And so but that varies based on the city. And here, where you might have variance requests or density or contributions, whatever that may be, that would be set forth in a development agreement. Here, there's no reason for the development agreement because you're following city standards. There's no request for anything different, whether it's in a mud or outside of a mud.
Okay, so you're ready to go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, I'll move the approval of the resolution 2022-11R petition for consent and creation of the municipal utility district.
Second.
Have a motion second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Here we go. Lose potency. All right, let's move on to item 9B. Because Mr. Davis has been
Patiently waiting.
Andrew, do you want to start? This is to consider and discuss a report on Fort Martin Scott and the former Texas Rangers Heritage Center Museum.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Andrea Schmidt, Parks Department. Tonight I'm bringing you an update report on the Texas Rangers Foundation managing Fort Martin Scott. They approached the city a couple of years ago, interested in this. With COVID, that kind of slowed things down. They came back last year and we worked out an agreement with them to start managing Fort Martin Scott. They started November 1st with the understanding it would be for 2 years and they would give reports. This first one within about 6 months, which we're running a little late. And then after the 2 years, y'all would decide whether or not to make a long-term commitment to them. There were some deliverables that were included in the agreement with the Texas Rangers. And so I'm going to have Mr. Joe Davis give an update on that and then also their museum.
Thank you. Mr. Davis.
Good evening, Council, and it's good to be here before you, and congratulations to you, Mr. Mayor, and the councilman that was reelected. I can think like the whole state, man. Fredericksburg's in good hands, and we're glad to have you on board. I'm glad to be here tonight to give you an update on Fort Martin Scott and anything you want to ask according to that. You want me to just start with it, or you have any questions?
No, go right ahead.
I'm currently overseeing the fort, and we've been doing a lot of work out there. It's, of course, springtime, and I'm going to look at that fort. You know, it's one of the crown jewels here in Fredericksburg that been preserved, and I'm looking at that fort as if it personally belongs to me, and I'm going to take care of it for you. And we've been doing a lot of work out there springtime, and mowing and weed eating and trimming some trees. We've been making a few repairs on some of the buildings that are out there that where the wood is rotted and so forth. But everything is going good there. I've implemented a report system that'll be available to you anytime you want to see it. We're doing it like we do at the Ranger Heritage Center. We'll be making out a weekly report on how many visitors come in there every day, how many sales they make, how many donations they get. That'll be done weekly and turned into our office. And then it'll be followed up with a monthly report for that month. And then at the end of the year, we'll have an annual report. So an annual report will show exactly how many visitors went into Fort Martin Scott during 2022, how many donations were made, and so forth, and what the gift shop done. So we're doing that now too. We are looking at the RV sites. Well, let me go back a little bit. The one thing that really needs to be done out there is the signs are in terrible shape as you go around uh, and look at the various tourists take that trail around the fort, and the signs that indicate out there what the barracks was and commissary and so forth. I went over there the other day and looked at them, and they're really in bad shape and need to be replaced as soon as possible because you can't hardly read them really. And I've contacted one of our, actually, an advisory director on our foundation board who owns a sign company in Bernie, Paul Hodekamp. He's going to meet me this week over there, and he's going to look at the signs and make a recommendation what should be put there. And we're going to try to get that done as soon as possible to get those, because really right now, if you go look at those signs, you cannot really read them, and they're in bad condition. So that's what I think really needs to be done immediately. The RV sites over there, there's 8 RV sites. We're looking at those also. They, right now, I think the ampage on RV sites is 30 amps. I'd like to see them up to 50 amps. The reason is that, you know, 30 amps is good to just have your lights on and so forth. But if you don't run the air conditioning heater, you don't need a little more ampage out there. And most people will want that. So I don't know who does that, whether the city put that electric in there or not. That's something we need to look at, though, and also get done. And, you know, they don't have, each site does not have a dump station where, but we did contact a the guy that owns the porta potties business here. He has a truck that he said could come by, and if a trailer is parked there and it needs to be dumped, he could do that whenever it's needed on those sites. Otherwise, I'd recommend putting a dump station at each site, like a 500 gallon or so forth. That's something we're looking at and would like to be done at the RV sites. And I have a board member that's also very interested in the fort. He's from California, matter of fact. He owned a company at one time called Hollywood Guns and Props. He furnished guns to movies. He had John Wayne's rifle, pistol, Clint Eastwood's, uniforms for the cavalry, all kind of things that he furnishes the movies out there. And he's already brought a trailer load down that we have stored right now, and he's donating this to the fort. He's done bring other stuff in from out there. He's sold out the company, and he's had all these in storage. So he has a ton of stuff that'll go toward the fort, and he's wanting to donate it. So I've got him a building over there in Kerrville, that's a storage building. He's going to be bringing stuff in, and he's really interested in the fort. He sits on our foundation board and has been involved with us some time, Al Fritch. So that's another thing we got going right now. And then a long range plan for the fort. I have one of my directors with me sitting over here, Wayne Musgrove. Wayne sat on the board at Pensacola, Florida for 12 years at the Naval Academy, where they built a flight school, academy for kids to come to. And it's really gone over good. And we're thinking long range now out there. One day we would like to see that done out at the fort, where we can bring kids up here and have an academy. Because you know what's going on in our world out there today. And we need to teach these kids and make them better citizens. That's one thing we're all about, to bring them in, and that's what our Heritage Center is about. We're already doing that there with kids, bringing them in and teaching them how to be better citizens and talking to them really on a weekly or monthly basis over there. So long range, it would fit perfect over at the fort, just like it did in Pensacola, Florida. Wayne said on over there. He's already put a committee together, and he's already got 2 directors that's going to make a donation toward that goal when it's time to do it. So, yes, sir.
Thank you. Let me direct some questions to you here. I appreciate that. I appreciate the download of the vision and the passion. That's all good. The agreement that the city made with you has some specifics that you are to report on the progress on.
Right.
And that's all in Exhibit A of what you all submitted as a proposal to get the city to consider you to be the contractor. So there are, and as I see it, there are 9 different deliverables here, and I don't want to go through all of them individually, but do you have anyone that could supply us a report on how things have gone since November, for example, on facilitating planning, fundraising efforts, coordinating volunteer and events, collecting and organizing archaeology, the maintenance plan, disaster plan, working with the THC, that sort of thing. These specific things that you are that you committed to in the
Sure.
proposal that the city is paying you.
Yeah, that would be no problem at all to supply council with a report to.
Yeah.
You want like a monthly report or?
Well, I would like one now because it's.
Yeah, we can go ahead and get you a report.
I don't mean tonight.
Written report.
But I mean ASAP because we're already in. What was this, November that it was enacted? Okay.
Yeah.
November.
And I can get you a report in pretty quick.
I'd appreciate that, Joe. Who's doing all this now? Are you doing it? Are you the one-man show? You doing all this yourself?
No,
Okay.
I got plenty of help over there
Okay.
at the office. I am currently overseeing that. I'm not a one-man show.
Well,
I'm running the office
do
and
you have
overseeing.
people dedicated to this particular proposal, the deliverables on this? Do you have people dedicated to like developing a maintenance plan and a disaster plan and those sorts of things that are in the agreement? I'm just trying to get a handle on who's doing this because you can't do it all.
No, I'm not. I'm overseeing it presently until we get someone else.
Okay, someone else is.
Oh yeah.
In the works.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And we have a man over there doing it who does the work right now. Marvin Schrader, and he turns in a weekly report.
Yeah.
And he's doing the work, and he reports directly to me
Yeah.
now.
Okay, but these things like a maintenance plan, disaster plan, I know that takes a long time to develop. Have those things? I know you got 18 months plus, or not quite a year and a half on this contract. But are those things kind of in the works?
You said I didn't quite understand.
Okay, I'm looking at the deliverables in the contract, in the proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so collecting archaeological reports, a maintenance plan, a disaster plan, streamlining consultation with the THC, a yearly financial plan to track finances, apply for grant funds, establish a social media presence, and address ongoing development and handling of the RV hookups, which you mentioned.
Yeah, and
so there's a list of things there that, yeah.
Yeah, I may have right here tonight that I can leave with you.
Okay. That's what I'm most interested in is a progress report on these deliverables.
Let me just look through here.
Andrea, is it in your budget to get Joe the things that he's asking for?
With regards to the RV park?
Yes.
Or the RV spot. So originally when
And the upgrade on the electrical?
No, that we have nothing in the budget for
Okay.
that. So the original project was started back in 2016. It was supposed to have been right after I started working here. It was supposed to have been about a $60,000 project. It ended up being about $100,000. The RV spots were originally put in also for just temporary weekend use for special events out there, so they're not really set up for long term. We also had to get an archaeologist to monitor everything, and that's why the costs exploded. So we would have to do quite a bit of looking into this and research. First, we want to decide, do we want to have long-term people there? Because that originally wasn't discussed. So if we want to do that, then we'll have to go back and put a budget together and find out how much an archaeologist will cost to come out there and do all that work.
All I'm asking for is a report, a progress report. I don't expect it to have been done. I know it's a long time, and those things, I've done these things, and I know they take a long time. So that's what I'm looking for, and this is a start. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what's been done since we've had it, and then it makes some projections in there, and then I can supply you a report on whenever you need it.
I'd like that when you get, as soon as you get the chance, like within the next couple of weeks?
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem.
Council, anybody else? Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate
No
it.
problem.
Okay.
Y'all have a good.
All right, then we'll go back to 9A, which is consider and approve the approval of a P and Z Commission procedures and requirements for future agenda items, Mr. Bond.
Thank you, Mayor. So as part of an ongoing discussion regarding the roles and responsibilities of the Planning and Zoning Commission, one topic that has been brought up is how a commission member could have an agenda item added to the formal agenda for further discussion. So currently, the city council does have a process. If you're not aware, it requires the mayor's approval or 2 council members' approval to have an item added to the agenda. So as part of the discussion with P&Z, we felt it was proper to maintain consistency with a similar format. The form that's included in your packet on page 84 has been created based on the council's format. It requires either the chair's approval or 3 total commission members. So that includes the requesting commissioner and then 2 other commission members. It also requires the city attorney's approval before placement on the agenda, just to make sure it complies with all the applicable state laws. So this was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission at the June 8th meeting. After some discussion, they did recommend approval, and so staff is recommending approval. To make this official policy, it does have to be acted upon by the city council, so that's why we're here tonight.
Looking at the form, you have chair's signature and 2 commissioners.
So so at the top, it'll note the commission member that is requesting the item. And so under the office use, it will either need to include 2 additional commission members or the chairs.
How often have you had requests from P&Z members to add things to the agenda?
So me personally, none. In the past, basically the requests have been routed through city staff. And the Director of Development Services would make that determination. This just kind of formalizes that process a little more, and it gives Daniel an opportunity in more of a formal setting to review the topic. Just to expand on that, a few of the topics that have been thrown around are things like the comp plan, affordable housing, sidewalk priorities, things like that. So again, staff will kind of direct the agenda item.
So is it what you've just brought up, is that more for discussion or for approval?
It would be for discussion. So we will have our standard approval process based on a developer's application. Again, this is just a route to formalize it more than anything. And we do anticipate additional training to talk about those roles and responsibilities, because there may be a topic that's not worth discussing. You know, there's really no recommendation that would come from that board.
Does this bring it in line with the way Historic Review Board is done? The application is somewhat the same. Is that? No?
So, yeah, I don't believe HRB has a formal process.
Sorry, I was confused.
Okay. And that's something we could look at doing as well for other boards.
Emily, what do you think?
Well, I'm curious why we're just doing planning and zoning. Like, if we're standardizing things, why don't we do it for ZBA and HRB as well? And then lock in that training we have for all.
So honestly, we weren't sure if the council would support this. You know, it seems to make sense, especially with a lot of new board members coming on. So that's something we can definitely do. I'll just have to work with Daniel on making sure, you know, we're following the appropriate rules. And then I assume most of those would come back to council for approval to formally adopt that format.
It just depends. So it specifically says that planning and zoning can adopt their own rules related to their procedural rules, but they have to have approval from council. So that's why this is here. Most of the planning and zoning items are driven by applications. So this would be fairly limited circumstances that I could foresee. It could be some discussion item they want to talk about. There's a couple situations where things can actually be initiated by planning and zoning or by city council. So if they want to initiate some proposed new zoning district or something like that, that they could use this process. And really, this is just to sort of expedite that process because they can always, a member can always bring up at a meeting, say, I want to talk about this, let's put it on the agenda for our next meeting to have a discussion. This just prevents that delay to another month. So if they meet once a month, they would have to wait, talk about it, and then have it on their next month's agenda. So this was brought forth as an idea to sort of speed up that process if they wanted something on their agenda for discussion, without having to wait through another meeting to get it. Up until this request was received by planning and zoning, everything on their agenda has always been driven by staff, essentially the director of development services.
Did P&Z vote on this, whether to approve it or not?
They did.
Yes.
Was it unanimous?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the procedures requirements for future agenda items for the Planning and Zoning Commission as presented by staff.
Second.
Motion second to approve this. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. All right, we're now at number 10, public comments on items not listed on the agenda. Is it Kathy Lux?
Hi, I'm Kathy Lux, and I live in Gillespie County. And I'm here to address the council this evening on an important issue that affects city, county, state, and national security. And that is the topic of hardening our power grid. The following threats have been identified and are well documented in a movie called Grid Down, Power Up that Senator Bob Hall recently had a showing of at the Capitol in the auditorium there. The threats include cyber sabotage, which is computer hacking of our instruments that control the power, sabotage by citizens, EMP detonation of a nuclear device above the United States by evildoers such as Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, who, by the way, are all privy to the devastation that such an event would cause. This means detonating a nuclear device above the atmosphere. It would not hurt people on the ground. It would totally wipe out the grid. Also, the last and not least is a geomagnetic disturbance, GMD, which is sunspots and coronal mass disturbances of our communications and the grid. If this occurs, anything with electronics will not work. That includes automobiles that are manufactured after the 65 age bracket. So we're looking for an old car. Gas, diesel generators won't work because there will be no power to pump the gas or the diesel fuel up from the storage tanks. We will essentially go back to the horse and buggy days. The reason being that if only 9 of the 55,000 transformers nationwide are taken out, the grid will be totally taken down. The transformers are not made in the United States. They are gigantic things. There are no transformers in reserve, and it would take 18 months to get a replacement. It's predicted that 7 out of 10 people will die within a year if the power is not restored. Solutions are available. Cities are beginning to partner with energy producers in their areas to harden and safeguard their access to energy. For example, San Antonio hardened their grid with a team effort including the military, the city of San Antonio, and CPS Energy at an approximate cost of $100 per person. Why are we not doing it? There are 1.2 billion reasons that nothing is being done at any level to do this. $1.2 billion is the amount lobbyists are paid to lobby against efforts to harden the grid. They don't want to pay for it. We can't wait for the state or federal government to take care of the problem. We can do it ourselves. It takes some planning and coordination with the energy, whoever provides our energy. We don't produce it here in Gillespie County, but they know, LCRA and other entities know, and we can collaborate with them. Gene and I, my husband and I, were without power for 20 days in February of 2021. I cannot tell you what a struggle it was for my 77-year-old husband and myself to chop wood and haul water and drive into town to get gas for a generator to run our fridge. Plus getting up at 2 a.m. to refuel those generators in -8 degrees temperatures. I don't ever want to do that again. So the solutions are here, and I would suggest anyone interested, I've left my phone number. I will be glad to gather information and facilitate whatever we need to do to start the ball rolling. And it's a long-term project, but hope you'll consider it. Thanks.
Thank you. Jeanette? You're done? Yeah. You're done for the night? All right. Okay. Item number 11, City Manager's Report.
Okay, Mayor, Council, just a quick report this evening. First on city job postings, specifically the Director of Development Services and City Attorney. We have, of course, posted the Development Services Director position. We have about 6 applications for that position that we're currently reviewing. Beginning to talk about deadline for closing that up and beginning the interview process. Probably look at somewhere within the next month or so to do that. So again, we're getting a number of applications, some that applied previously, some new applicants, about 50-50. We're also working on the making slight modifications to the job posting and the brochure associated with the city attorney position. That's something that we'll be wrapping up this week, and we'll proceed with beginning for that search. Regarding the budget process, and this is really for the benefit of those visiting today, we have started the budget process. We had a special meeting prior to the regular meeting today. As part of the budget process, we always meet with the council right off the bat to discuss our capital improvement plan projects. Met this afternoon to talk about the budget priorities that we may have missed, weren't included in that report. The council may want to give direction to city staff to concentrate on. So that was a good meeting this evening. Wanted to note we have a public hearing for citizen input on the budget coming up on July 5th, a little bit later in the process, August 22nd, September 14th. Also, public hearings on the budget. So it has been mentioned a few times by the public that they would appreciate a very open and transparent budget process. We intend to do that this year, certainly every step of the way. That is my report.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Council comments.
I have a couple quick comments. Had an airport board advisory board meeting today. T hangar occupancy is 100% with 31 on the wait list. Crosswind, which is a ground school or flight school as well, they've started in-person ground schools back. They now have 11 students, and everybody's excited to be back in person. Texas Forest Service is fully staffed and fully operational with 5 vehicles, 1 helicopter and 4 airplanes. And they plan on, because of the weather and the drought, they plan on being here for the next several months. And they've been, I think, between the helicopter and 1 airplane, they've dropped over 300,000 gallons of fire retardant in the last month. So very busy. Lots of development in the business park out there. And A lot of fuel sales, combined avgas and jet A fuel, they are 29% ahead of last year, which was a record year. Last year, they sold 530,000 gallons of fuel. So far this year, they're halfway there. So that's just through the first 5 months. So a lot of things happening at the airport, and the airport is a huge asset for our community, and very excited to have it. So that's my report.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? All right. Number 13, items for future agenda.
Mayor, council, this is lining up to be a fairly busy agenda for the July 5th meeting. Starting out, we had planned on giving our first development update during this meeting. This is an item that we can move if we do start stacking up just a little bit. This is the everything development within the city limits presentation by our building official and development services department. Taking a little bit of time to convey all of this information to the council, location of what's going on, what's coming up, and so forth. We do have, as I mentioned, public input on the budget. I don't know what to anticipate in terms of input, citizen input on the budget, but we do have that item required to be on this agenda. We also have an affordable housing presentation by Vince. Everything he didn't say tonight, he's planning on saying. Well, he has a lot of knowledge. If you know Vince, he lives and breathes this, and certainly has a lot of information to convey. So we're planning on a very extensive presentation of material. Again, I understand the council is very new with respect to this topic. I would like for Vince to provide an overview of the affordable housing study. Presentation similar to the one given to the council and the commissioners back earlier this year. Then also talk about some strategies moving forward that the council may consider regarding affordable housing, public facilities, corporations, things like that. A little bit higher level, not getting into as much detail, following up with a little bit more detail. So again, we want to provide plenty of time for a thorough discussion, certainly. Another item that's not on the list is discussion of moving forward with presentations regarding the hotel and conference center or rejection of the request for proposals for the hotel and conference center. So again, this is something that the council may want to take quite a bit of time discussing. You've all been briefed on the two proposed projects. Moving forward or rejecting. Lastly, I just wanted to mention, and Daniel, is it okay, the special meeting? We had talked just a little bit very early on prior to Kathy stepping down, the possibility of scheduling a meeting. We had planned on the end of May. A workshop for the council regarding the city charter, the city's ethics ordinance, council rules of procedure. As we're moving through these meetings, as we're continuing to meet with staff, maybe run into each other here and there, we want to make sure that the council understands what the rules and regulations are for the council, talk about required training, why that's required, but give you plenty of time to review this information. So with that being said, we're looking at trying to schedule probably a special workshop type meeting, maybe out at the golf course, a couple of hours, some morning between probably mid-July to the end of July. The schedule is stacking up pretty heavy. I don't think we can get that done possibly before the last meeting in July, but just needed a little bit of input from the council regarding rough schedule for trying to get that meeting scheduled. Morning, likely. Emily, I'll need to have a better understanding of your schedule with kiddos and so forth, so we can get that without any conflicts, but sometime toward the end of the month. So the questions really are the hotel and conference center discussion and then that special meeting.
workshop before. Yes. Before the July 18th.
Before or after that meeting, it's not critical that we get it done before that. And I'm taking a look at the budget calendar,
I thought you said late July.
probably late July, probably after that meeting. Yes, ma'am. That'd probably be best.
Week of the 25th? Week of July 25th?
That's your vacation. That's your vacation.
No, I'm gone the week before.
But we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I might send out an email just asking individual council members and try to put all that together and get a date nailed down. But that is something that I would like to,
Yeah.
definitely like to do.
Procedures, methods.
We did it August 1st. We could meet all day.
That's true. Let's dedicate the day.
Any thoughts on hotel and conference center discussion versus affordable housing versus development update on that same meeting, July 5th? Is there one of those you want to move or?
Well, though, affordable housing is, I don't want to talk about the hotel and affordable housing the same day. That's a long discussion.
Preference on which one?
Yeah, affordable for me.
So do the affordable?
Can we do conference center on the 18th?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make sure that that should be fine.
Are we within the time frame?
I don't believe there is a time.
There is. Okay, good.
That's within the rough time frame that I discussed with Kent, and I know he passed along to the developer. We talked about sometime in July. I know Kent's listening in.
Okay.
There's no formal cutoff date or anything that you have to take action by them.
Okay.
That's it. All right. Well, that brings us to the executive session, which we have, Gallery, we have two issues we're discussing. The continuation of a discussion about property located at North Washington, Austin Street, and you've seen these on your agenda, and the appointment, evaluation, reassignment duties, or dismissal of a public officer, et cetera, as is listed here. This is our couple of topics for executive session. Motion?
I move we go out of regular session into executive session.
A second.
Motion is second to go out of regular into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Do what? Oh, hello. Sorry. Okay. I move that we appoint Devin Mullen and Ashley Hunter as regular members of the Board of Adjustments. And we will continue to find replacements for the 2 vacancies.
I'll second that.
Motion second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
For
If I
the-
know I've got unanimous, do I have to ask for?
For the, I move to appoint Matthew Pipkin to the Fredericksburg Convention and Visitors Bureau as a city appointee.
I second.
Motion second to appoint Matthew Pipkin to approve CBB. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I move that we appoint Liliana Welliver and Sam Childers to the Historic Review Board.
I'll second.
Motion second. Discussion?
Can you clarify which one is being appointed for Sharon's position or vacancy?
Liliana will be appointed to replace Sharon Joseph, and Sam Childers will replace Barry Kaiser.
Reappoint. David Richard.
And David Bouillon, Richard Laughlin, and Amy Slaughter will be reappointed.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Market Square redevelopment. Tony Klein will move from regular membership to the city council representative, and Jerry Lukenbach will go from city council representative to regular member.
Second.
Motion second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 You're abstaining?
Do we need to reappoint Polly and Cindy? Shelley?
And finally, P and Z.
Wait, do we need to reappoint Polly and Cindy?
That's what I'm doing
I'm
next.
sorry. Wrong page.
Make a motion to reappoint Polly and Cindy Scroggins to the P and Z for another term. And I make a motion to appoint Tom Musselman for the vacant position on P and Z.
Second.
So motion second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to entertain item number 16.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all for your time. 3 hours, 15 minutes.